So I just watched Wicked, and listen, I have seen the musical once. It is not a musical that I hold any really strong love for. I remember seeing it and enjoying it, and I saw it recently, maybe like, I don't know, 5 years ago, so it's fresh enough in my mind. And this musical's been on Broadway forever and has toured, and many people have seen it. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. Although I bet there's a good portion of the audience here who always knew of Wicked, but never got around to seeing it. So I'm curious to see how they feel about it. But I will say, as someone who is pretty familiar with it, especially this beginning stuff, because yes, this is a part 1 of 2, which is something they don't tell you until right as the movie starts, and you're like, oh right. But I get it, people don't like 1 of 2s until they like the 1, and then they love the 2. But like, you can't sell it like that and people feel like it's half of a movie. Either way, Wicked's great. I think it's very, very good. I think it gets almost everything right when it comes to adapting this big musical for the screen. Yes, I know there's like a little bit of kind of dullness added to some of the shots. I've seen people talking about that, and I think I saw the director, who I believe is named John M. Chu, saying that they wanted to make it look more realistic, which obviously, it's Oz and stuff, so like, how realistic is it? But I was expecting, because of that, way worse. I was expecting it to look like, I was expecting it to look like the end of Avengers Endgame, where everything is washed out. And I'm not saying that that's bad, because I do think in that scene, you can track all the action and it works. I'm just saying that, like, you look at individual screenshots and it's like, that is Brown, and then there's that guy's hammer or whatever. But all that to say, I was very impressed with how much color they managed to work into this. And obviously, color's a big part of this show, so they couldn't not go for it and make Elphaba, like, kind of green. Just be really green, and Glenda has to be really pink. So I think all of that shows through in a way that other Broadway musicals, like, let's say, The Producers Movie or Jersey Boys, are two kind of recent-ish examples, not recent-ish, but like in the last 20 years, where I feel like looking back, you're like, this just looks kind of pale. Like, the show is more exciting looking than this, especially Jersey Boys. I don't think this had that problem. Not that, they're that similar. Although Jersey Boys is great, not the movie, but the musical. If you ever have a chance, it's good. And this is coming from someone who's from Jersey, but still, that, if anything, that was gonna make me like it less, because like, oh, it's Jersey Boys, but it's cool. It's actually good. The most important thing here, I think, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to say this movie lives and dies on casting. I think Cynthia Erivo, very good. I was very impressed with her. I've seen her in a couple things before, and like, obviously knew she was a great singer. Knew she could act, like, knew she'd be able to sell the big emotional moments. And I like that, like, the way that this show plays Elphaba. Yes, she's very defensive, she has an answer for everything, but there's other characters that kind of break that down. Like, I think she was very good. But I would say my biggest surprise is, I think, and I remember seeing the video by CJ the X about this and being like, if you say so. But I think Ariana Grande is really funny. And I was very impressed by how, because obviously, again, she can sing and she can kind of act, because she's been acting, and she was on, what was it, Victorious, or one of those shows, one of those Disney Channel or Nickelodeon shows. But as far as I can remember, not a huge actor. Now, I do think I was a little bit primed for this, because she went on SNL somewhat recently, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I thought she was very good. I thought she had really solid timing. I think a lot of the musicians do tend to do really well on SNL. I think Charlie XCX also had a great week last week, so maybe it has something to do with like live performing and being someone who is used to that environment, and also jokes and music being so dependent on timing. Anyway, but I guess she just seems really smart. And like, not to say she didn't seem smart, but that was never, and I'm sure, she's like an incredibly famous person who has a really successful brand and stuff. Of course she's smart, but like, in terms of like comedic timing and stuff like that, some of the lines and the reactions, I mean, I love. There was one bit that stood out to me as far as things that were surprising to me, and it's the bit where she's just swimming around on the floor. I thought that was super funny, but also, I don't remember what it was, but I think it's her first real Glinda line, or Galinda line at the time, where they kind of come to her in the town, and it's that big, opening number, which I quite liked and felt like very Broadway-y, but I can't remember what it was. I have to watch it again. But whatever it is, she's in full Galinda mode, and she's going and giving her a speech, and she has that very flowery voice, and someone kind of taps her on the shoulder or something and says, hey, what about this? And the way she comes back with a, what? Very funny. And very, like, not like hard to do, but not easy. I was really impressed with how funny she was. I think her and Cynthia Erivo had great chemistry. The other performers in it were also doing a great job. I think Jonathan Bailey was very charming. I don't really know too much about him. It seems like he's from Downton Abbey mostly, but I get it. I think he was a solid Fiyero. I liked his number. I think the adults are fun, and by adults, I mean adults. So let's say this. I have two criticisms of Wicked, and they're both just things that are true of the show and the movie. I think because it's a movie, it's a little bit weirder. First of all, the actors playing children, and by children, I'm going for, they're supposed to be maybe in college. Let's be generous, because it's like a boarding school, but they're supposed to be quite young. They're all quite old. And like, Ariana Grande can sell young, like she seems like she's 20 or whatever. Owen Yang, who I love, I know he's not 20. But I mean, on Broadway, obviously, this is how this works too. Kristen Chenoweth and Dina Menzel are also, adults when they do this play. But I don't know. It's not quite the Dear Evan Hansen effect where it's like, that's an adult and those are children, because all of the children are played by adults. But it's just a little strange every so often because you look up somebody and you're like, oh, right, that guy's in his mid-30s. Okay. But I like the adults, like the adults, mostly played by Michelle Yeoh. Fun, good. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to like spoil Wicked for you guys. Not that you could spoil like the thrust of it, but spoiling the ideas of it and some of the moves that the story makes. I like Michelle Yeoh. I like Jeff Goldblum. I mean, I'm a sucker for Jeff Goldblum. He's one of those guys that I just find very, very entertaining, and I think he's good for the Wizard. I think he's great. But yeah, you have to kind of suspend your belief that this is like that scene in the beginning of The Greatest Showman where Hugh Jackman is playing like a 17-year-old and he's clearly still Hugh Jackman. Always reminds me of the Dewey Cox thing where he's 17-year-old Dewey Cox. But anyway, the other thing I would maybe caution people on going into this is like, I have never seen anything written before or since that does this much soloing. I don't mean soloing in terms of musical solos. I mean soloing in terms of that scene in Solo where they're like, "What's your name, boy?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have a name." And he's like, "Well, you're alone, so you must be solo." Like that scene, because every single plot point is something. And I don't. Here's the thing with maybe my problem with this. And I would listen to a Broadway person because I do think that this is a show that, for me at least, a lot of the big moments are in the first act. Defying Gravity, Popular, Dancing Through Life. Like, I cannot name you a song from the back half of Wicked. So I'm sure, besides like reprises of all of those, but like almost every line is somebody saying something to set up what happens in The Wizard of Oz. And I almost think maybe about halfway through the movie, it transitions from being kind of like, Jesus Christ, to like, okay, tell me why the road is yellow. I want to know. I'm sure there's a story behind everything, right? Like, it kind of becomes fun, where, it, like every single thing that ever happened in Wizard of Oz is something that was set in motion 20 years ago. And that's super funny. The way that they do this. I do think the show, just like the book of it, is funny. And I like the music. I think it's very, it's become like a humongous hit. This thing, Hamilton had the same problem, I guess, where like, of course it's, the biggest musical. It's one of the biggest musicals. So of course it's very well written. It is both very popular and also still good music. Still very catchy. The melodies are interesting. The lyrics are fun. It does zigzag around a lot. So I liked it. Listen, the politics of it are interesting. I kind of remembered this from the play because again, it's Wizard of Oz. You know Wizard of Oz stuff, and you know what the big moments are in the witches, like things that she does, what happens to her, what she has. So you can kind of see that all come together. In the background, spoiler alert, and I only mean spoiler alert because like this isn't in the trailers, this is as far as I can remember because the trailers are just pretty much the song, is there's a humongous plot, and the whole movie is basically, and the second one will be more about this, but is about the genocide of the forest creatures and turning them into just plain old animals, which is something that is happening to mostly the teacher, played by Peter Dinklage. There's a lot of stuff in this that happens where, as an X-Men fan, I'm like, yeah, no, X-Men. Yeah, move the coin. That's an X-Men. They do that in one of the X-Men movies. And I guess they did that after Wicked, and I think the book came out long before that. But I do think it's funny that Peter Dinklage is in both of them. But this time, he's being hunted by the Sentinels instead of making them. Look at that. It's on the other side of the field now. Good for him. It's come full circle. I also think it's funny that he was also in the Hunger Games one of these, which is like a prequel where everybody's in school and he's the teacher, although in this he was nice and that he was kind of disaffected and, well, he was a little complicated in that. But I think he's fine. I will say, there were certain bits of the special effects that I didn't love. I think most of the big important effects looked great. I think the like set designs looked great. There was one like I was very surprised by like some of the animals looked a little weird. But you know, I don't know. It's I'm sure it's a very expensive movie, but like it's not an expensive movie like say, oh, I don't know, Red One, where I look at it and I go, where did the money go? But you know, there's only so much you can do. I will say this: I did not have a problem with singing in my theater because I purposefully went to a place at a time where I knew I wouldn't have to deal with this. And I got lucky. I've heard horror stories. And I think we as a society need to figure this out. And it seems like they've kind of figured it out. It's like we're going to do sing-along versions of this eventually. And then, you know, until then, don't sing. I agree. I think that is how it should be done. And I think more people... like, we just need to be cool with that. And I think this is a movie theater. This is on movie theaters and moviegoers to some extent. But, like, I don't want to tell some kid to be quiet, you know, like, because they're having fun singing their favorite musical. And I do think The Rock is delusional for tweeting this. And he is about to do not only a live-action remake of Moana, but also a Moana sequel that presumably has music. I don't know. I haven't seen any ads for this, which is always an amazing sign. But he's trying to earn the favor of the theater children. I don't know. But again, this is on theaters. This is on theaters seeing kids, and maybe this is something they should tell everybody. Like, as you walk in, by the way, this is a quiet screening. We're going to do and if you want to exchange your ticket and buy one for the other one next week, go ahead. You do that right now. We'll give it to you for, not like for free, but you could just exchange it. And that's that. And I think that would be fine because, especially with this, it's like, and what I would say to people that are big fans of it and like really love Wicked is like, you wouldn't do this on Broadway, right? Because you're there to see the people sing the music. Like, you could do this on the car ride home, but it's not about you. Like, you're supposed to be watching it, but B, like, if you're singing, the people next to you can't hear the actual Broadway professionals singing. And I think that's true of these actors. I also think it's interesting that John M. Chu, who directed this and directed G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra 2 or whatever it's called, the one with The Rock, it's actually probably the better of those. It's not called Rise of Cobra. The first one's called Rise of Cobra. Retaliation? I think it's Retaliation. Yeah. One where they punch each other with guns in the very end. They just think he said you have to ask movie theaters to turn it up. It's pretty loud. I don't think that's a humongous problem. And I would be curious to see what he's talking about. I mean, I've been in many situations before where I've been in the theater next to the other theater and I've been able to hear explosions. I'm like, oh yeah, the Avengers must be finishing up a big fight or something. Hopefully that doesn't get in the way of my fences screen. You know, like that's sometimes just that's annoying, but you know, a whole theater full of kids singing and then a cranked up volume because we can't hear the actual actors over the singing kids and adults, by the way. I'm not, when I say kids, I mean anybody 30 and younger, pretty much. But that's gonna ruin Gladiator 2. So and listen, I hear it's not that great. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know, it's just an annoying thing. And this whole theaters need bouncers thing is something I've been harping on forever, and I think it is even more true now. And I like movie musicals. That's kind of the thing, right? Like, I enjoy a fun one, you know, not like the Joker one, but like the Elton John one. I really like that, Rocket Man. And I was very appreciative of the fact that during my screening, no one sang. And I'd like to keep it that way. But yeah, anyway, back to actual Wicked. I am a little bit worried with whatever part 2 is going to be. Because I think all this, like I said, all the stuff that is fun is in Act 1, and Act 2 seems to be bridging what easily could be the end of this. Like, if it was just like the intro of the Wicked Witch, and not to say exactly where this lets off, but like part 1 ends at a part that could easily be the end of both of them. And you just in your head go, I guess this happens and this happens, this happens. Oh, that's why this guy is here. And there must be something that happens in between to make her kind of change her tune on this. But everything in part 2 is really just kind of, and I'm sure there's more to it than that, but a lot of it is bridging part 1 with Wizard of Oz. So if you're like, how did this character get from here to here? Well, you're going to find out. That is sometimes cool, sometimes a little anticlimactic. I imagine they're going to add more stuff and maybe more like revolution and there's something, I don't know, to give it a little bit more, oomph at the end. But also, like, this is, I don't know, 2.5 hour show that is already a 2.5 hour movie. So we got to find those next 2 hours somewhere. I don't envy them, I guess is what I'm saying. Because this is always the problem with musicals. A lot of the time, at least. It's like, first act's fun, second act's not as fun. But then if you split them up into 2 showings, what are you doing? Like, how are you going to maintain that balance? The other thing I'm thinking is, this movie's going to make a lot of money, right? Does this mean they're going to remake Wizard of Oz? Because you can't make a prequel to this. This is the prequel. And you can't make a sequel because it's Wizard of Oz. You could make a sequel post Wizard of Oz, I guess, in like the Wicked verse. And even this, like, I would say a lot of the stuff that happens like lines up with Wizard of Oz. You really don't need to remake Wizard of Oz, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know how because this is going to make a lot of money. And as a world, and as like a kind of, I think of everything in these terms, but like as something that could kind of take the place of Harry Potter, if they could pump out 15 of these, they would. But how do they? What's the angle? There must be other books, right? So if you're in the comments and you're like, this is probably what they'll do with the third Wicked movie that will inevitably exist, Wicked 3 after Dorothy or something, let me know, because I would love to hear what you think and what other people think. Because I'm sure theater people have different thoughts on this, and then people that have read the books and people that have just watched the movie have like an idea of where you want the story to go. But overall, I would say this is good. This is, everybody that already liked this musical is going to really like this. Anybody that didn't like the musical, if you saw it on Broadway, you're probably not going to like it. But everybody else, like, as long as you're in the mood for a musical, this is pretty good. This is about as good as this could be. And yeah, I think, it's really, really, really solid casting. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, just really terrific. So, I don't know, go see it. Do I recommend these a lot? Probably not. And I don't like give number scores, but I liked it. It was pretty good. So thank you so much. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.